Welcome, folks. Homesh Rashi, Torah portion, Bahar. We are in the fourth reading, fourth portion. Today's is a very special day. Nishtakim for Fallen, no lost hope. Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach. So I just had some chametz. Now with that, we should have some matzah. We have matzah in the back. Can go make a motzi. You have to go wash and make a motzi though. So you can have it afterwards. But you have to go wash and make a motzi. But we have to have matzah today, right? Pesach Sheni with chametz. So the chametz I had. I'm going to have some more chametz. Today's learning is in honor of the yahrzeit of our dear Beryl ben Yehuda Kayin. His mother, Dina Bas Shmuel. Her neshama is having an aliyah now. Had an aliyah through the Kaddish and now having an aliyah through Torah study. L'chaim, l'chaim to neshama. Ooh, coming down like water. Good thing you only gave me a little bit. Okay, we are the fourth reading in Parshas Bahar. We are in chapter 25, verse 25 in Vayikra, Leviticus. Okay. Ki yamuch achicha, when your achicha, what's achicha? Your brother. Yamuch will become destitute. Umacher, and he sells me'achuzasai, from of his belongings, of his inheritance, of his property. Uba goyalai, a karavelav. And remember, ancestral home is meant to be kept, right? But if you get like now poor and you have to sell off, what could you do? Or can someone do for you? Redeem it, right? We learned that. So we're continuing with this idea of redeeming. And his redeemer will, a karavelav, that is a relative to him, right? He comes. Ugal is memkar ochiv, and he redeems his brother's sale. Okay. Oops. Okay. So Rashi in 25. So when your brother becomes impoverished, Melamed, this teaches us Shein Adam Rashay, that a person is not permitted Limkar Sadeo, to sell his field, Ella Machmas Dechik, except for under pressure of poverty. Others, you're not allowed to sell. Why not?
Heritage.
It's your heritage.
Yeah.
It's your heritage. You're not allowed to sell your heritage, right? Unless on this circumstance, right? Because it says ki yamuch, when your brother will become poor. In other words, when he's not poor, then you're not going to sell. Ma'achuzasei, his ancestral heritage, v'loy kula me'achuzasei, very exacting. From, what does it mean from? It means partially, Rashi says, v'loy kula, but not all of it. Limda Torah derech eretz. This Torah teaches us proper conduct. Shisha sodei latzma, that he should leave a field for himself. Others, he should leave something over. Shouldn't be selling everything, even when he's poor. What does it mean, limda derech eretz? What does it mean? They're teaching us proper conduct. Doesn't mean la halacha. Let's say the guy's really poor and this is all he's got left, so he could sell it. Torah is trying to teach you a proper conduct, though. Not, other words, as opposed to halacha, right? It's not a halacha that you have to do it, from what the way I understand it, at least according to Rashi. Okay? The goal is memkar ochiv, and he comes to redeem his brother Seyel. V'ein halikeach yochel akev. What does it mean he's coming? And what if the guy who has it doesn't want to sell it? Doesn't matter. As Rashi says, the buyer is not able to prevent him. Right, because he's redeeming it to be part of the ancestral heritage, to bring it back. Okay, verse 26. Yes.
Can the brother keep it as a heritage, or you have to bring it back to his brother, the original? If the brother redeems it and the other guy gets the money later, does he have to give it back, or they keep it, or it's still the heritage?
Well, let's look at the words in the pasuk. Let's be exacting with the words. Uba goyaloi, and he's coming, his redeemer. Who's his redeemer? The poor guy that sold it. So it's his redeemer. So it means he's redeeming it for him. Right?
Yeah.
He's redeeming it for him. Exactly.
But it says may come, it doesn't say must come.
No, of course. It doesn't have to come.
Like, you don't have to redeem your
No,
brother's property.
no, you're not responsible for it. Not responsible. Exactly.
Somebody else,
You gotta be a man.
Huh?
somebody else do it?
You mean that's not a relative?
Yeah.
I think anybody could do it. I think the Torah is only speaking in usual terms. I don't think your friend could do it for you, right? Yeah, I don't think it has to be. I think it's just Dibra Torah Beloshin Hoiva. It's speaking in the usual terms. Usually, it's going to be a relative is going to do it as opposed to anybody else.
Yeah.
That's if I recall correctly.
Well, the heritage.
26.
Huh?
Oh,
Okay. Now 26. The ish ki lo yeh lo goyel. And if a man doesn't have a redeemer, right? The siga, in other words, a redeemer that's going to be earlier, right? The siga yode to be kidei gulase, and he gains enough means to be able to afford the redemption. Rashi in 26. The ish ki lo yeh lo goyel. A person doesn't have a redeemer. Ki yesh lecha adam Israel. Is there such a person? Shein lo goyelim, that has no redeemers. In other words, only Jews who have no blood relatives are childless converts. So our verse cannot refer to them because it speaks of those who have ancestors who allotted heritage. So Rashi is asking a good question. What is this talking about? He's not talking about a convert, because a convert doesn't have ancestral land. Ancestral land was given to those who went into the land of Israel. So it's carried on to them. So someone who converts doesn't have that, right? So who's this talking about? Right? Ella, but speaking about Goyal, Shiyuchal means a redeemer who is able, who has the financial means, the Goyal Mimkara, to redeem that which the seller has sold. Right? So it doesn't mean that there isn't someone who could redeem for him. It's just someone doesn't have the means to redeem. That's what Rashi is saying. Okay?
So he's saying like a convert, for instance, wouldn't have the means to redeem because he wouldn't have any land?
No, it means that the verse is not perhaps the verse is not speaking about a convert.
Yeah.
In other instances, we would speak about that if there isn't there isn't an inheritor.
Mhm.
So how could that be amongst Israel? There's not an inheritor for a convert. That could be that they converted, didn't get married and have children, right? So they don't have anybody who will be their inheritor if they are single, because they're they don't have anybody that's Jewish to inherit, right?
Yeah.
So in other instances, that's what it means. Here, though, that's not what the reference is, right? Because everybody because the convert doesn't get have a piece of the land, because the piece of the land was given to those who went into the land of Israel, so it just carried on after that.
Yeah.
Right? If they converted before they came into the land of Israel, so then they would get. Actually, no, if their parents would have converted, because because the land, ancestral land, didn't go by those who went into the land. It went from the previous generation. Well, we'll learn that later. It was based on, yeah. Okay. Chav Zayin 27. So he has to chishev. Chishev means he has to calculate the years left of the sale. The heishivas ha'edev, and he has to return the remainder liish asher machar lo, to the man that he sold it to. And then he will return the inheritance. We learned this idea already, so interesting why this is being repeated, right? We already know this, that right? If you bought it, if there's 10 years, if there's 20 years, it was bought with 20 years left to the Jubilee, and you bought it for $20,000, and you only had it for 5 years, so now you have to pay $15,000 to get it back, right? This concept we already learned. So question is, of course, what's going on over here? Let's see Rashi. The years of the sale. The seller asks the buyer, one second. Why is that? How many years are left? Were there from the time that you bought the field until the yovel, till the Jubilee? But the buyer replies, so many years. Oh, and how much did I sell it to you? So much and so much. And the seller then calculates, they're destined to return the field to in the yovel. So thus turns out that you have bought it, the number of crops, according to the total of each year. And you have consumed so much crops, let's say 3 or 4 years, for example. So he deducts that amount of the 3-4 years, right? And he takes the rest back. And this is what it means by the next words of the verse. That he returns the excess, but the price, the purchase price, over that which was consumed by the buyer over the years that he had the field. And he shall give it back to the buyer. He returns to the buyer the difference between the purchase price and the value of the crops that were the buyer harvested till that point. So Rashi, I'm not clear. It seems to be that we learned this idea already, and why this is being repeated here.
We learned it recently.
Yeah, we learned it. No, it was yesterday, or the day before.
Yeah.
Okay. After Li'ish asher machar lo, to whom the man to whom it was that he had sold it. This refers the seller who comes to redeem it. This seller who comes to redeem it. Right, the original owner. 1 second. So our verse is coming to teach us that if the first buyer sells the field to another buyer at a higher rate than it was sold to him, the original seller does not redeem it from the second buyer at the higher rate, but rather from the first buyer at the lower rate.
The first buyer sells it to the.
Right. Reuven sold to Shimon.
Yeah.
Shimon then sold it to Levi.
Okay, gotcha.
And he sold it at a higher rate, though. So now Reuven's coming to buy it back. He got enough money now. 5 years passed, 3-4 years, Rashi says, passed. He got enough money and he's going to buy. What rate is he buying it at?
Levi's?
No.
Shimon?
Shimon. To what he sold it.
Yeah.
What he sold it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what he sold it for. That was the,
Deal.
that was the deal. In business, that doesn't wash, right? In business doesn't wash. Well, this is not business, this is Torah. We're in the business of Torah, and Torah says no.
So Levi's actually losing money in this situation.
Yes.
Right, but Levi knows that he bought it at a higher rate.
Okay.
He knows that he's not gonna remember. Anybody that's buying anything based on this knows it's only lasting to the yovel at most. A yovel that goes back, right? But it could go back earlier if the original owner either has a redeemer that's going to buy it for him, or himself got money and now is going to buy it back, right? So everybody knows that.
At the oil, he doesn't have to pay for it.
Right. Well, because he paid. Remember, think of it as you're leasing property rather than you're buying property. That's really what it comes down to. You're leasing up to 50 years, right? That's what you're doing, or 49 years at most, right? That's what you're doing. So when you look at it that way, then that's a different, right?
Yeah.
So same thing, Levi, when he went and bought it, he also knows he's leasing. He knows that he's, and obviously he's going to do his due diligence, and he knows that he's paying, but it might be worth it for him. Maybe the crop, there was a bumper crop, and it was a great season or whatever. Okay. So, sorry.
We're still in Rashi.
Yeah. So that's what this verse is talking about, and therefore this is not repetitive, because what's it telling us? You're making the calculation based on the original sale. So that's why it's repeated, right? Because Reuben, who sold it to Shimon sold it to Levi. So now this verse is coming to tell us that in such an instance, when he buys it back, he's still doing it according to the original agreement that they had, and not the second sale. Yeah, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Last pasuk for today. If he doesn't find his hand, what does that mean? He doesn't find his hand. Exactly. Day enough. Hashiv, to return. Loy, to return to him, meaning to return to him money, to repay him. I'm giving you exact translation. Well, it doesn't sound right, but just so you get the words. So then the mimkara, the possession, the sale, will be in the hands of the purchaser until the Jubilee year. And then in the Jubilee, in the Yovel year, it will go out and become back his inheritance, right? Without any payment, without anything.
So in other words, no matter what he does, he still keeps his inheritance.
In a field, yes. In a field. We're going to learn, I think, tomorrow. Going to learn
About a house.
About a house. A house, not the same. I mean, it depends. Depends what kind of house. In a walled city and so on. Yeah, it'd be interesting when we see that. Okay, Rashi 28. They hashiv loy sufficient to repay him. He can. From here we learn that you can redeem to a portion. In other words, let's say I'm gonna redeem it, but I only have half the money today, or 3/4 of the money. I'm paying you 3/4, and I'm gonna pay you within the year the other quarter. You gotta pay the whole amount.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. How do you know that?
Enough to retain.
It says if you cannot raise enough money.
Kadei hashiv loy, enough to return to him. What do you have to return to him? The full amount. So in other words, not partial amount. That's the exactness of the words. Huh? No? Valley?
Valid.
It's you have to pay the whole thing back.
Yes.
Whatever you owe, right? How do we know that? Because the words are implying that, right? Enough to pay him. Okay, next Rashi. Ad shnasa yovel, until the yovel jubilee year, shelo yikanes, that he should not enter l'seichai into that year while the possession of the field klum at all. Shayovel nishamet, because the yovel year releases the fields to the original owners b'tchilase at the beginning of the year. In other words, we already know this. We already said that yovel goes back. The question is, does it go back at the beginning of the yovel year or the end of the year or middle of the year? When?
Yeah.
So this verse is coming ad shnasa yovel. In other words, it's going to be in his possession until the beginning of the yovel year.
Yeah.
Right? That's a novel thing that this verse is telling us. Got that?
The 49th year, not the 50th.
No,
Well, at the end of the 49th year, right? In other words, you might think that maybe it's at the end of that year. How do we know? Right? Because the verse just said. Otherwise, we didn't know until now. Okay, let's see if we can see some things from the Rebbe. Kai Gesunz.
Half an hour. 35 minutes.
What's that? In 35 minutes.
Yeah, he's filling in.
Hey, okay, David, thank you.
I'm going back for my shot. Yeah. I have to meet Josie in the afternoon.
All right, folks, whatever you're saying is being heard around the world.
Okay, good.
So if you want to share with the world.
Even the discussions of Torah scholars have meaning.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at a verse from yesterday. Go back to verse 23. Go back to verse 23. Said the land will not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me. For you are strangers and temporary residents with me. Right? Got that from yesterday, verse 23?
The land shall not be sold permanently.
Huh?
The land shall not be sold permanently. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, verse 23 from yesterday.
Okay, gotcha. Leaking it.
So the Rebbe asks a question that in the verse, it seems to be somewhat contradictory. It says the reason why it's not sold permanently is because you were gerim v'toishavim, right? Ger means stranger, which means stranger means that you're there, you're temporary dwelling, right? Because if you live somewhere permanently, then you're not a stranger anymore, right? Toishavim means the opposite, that you're dwelling there in a permanent fashion. So it seems to be, so what's going on here? But if you're giving a reason because you're temporary, so then, hey, we get it. Therefore, the owning of the land is temporary, right? It's not eternal. But it also says toishavim, that you are permanent on the land. So it doesn't seem to wash, right? So question clear?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Stranger but permanent on the land.
So where else do we see a similar idea where you use the term ger v'toishav? Who used it? Anybody remember it? This is a while back. You're not going to remember. Avram Avinu. Whoa, Berlak. Oh, yeah, good one.
Strangers in the land.
No, he said when he wanted a burial place for Sarah,
Right.
so he said to Ephraim, ger v'toishav.
Yeah.
Anochi imachem. I am a ger, stranger in the land, and a permanent resident. He used both terms, right, in the land, right? And Rashi,
Didn't get the exact one.
right? And Rashi says, that's a contradiction. So he explains Rashi, if you remember over there. He said, if you want, I will be a stranger. And if not, I will be a permanent resident. And I'll take it because it's coming to me. In other words, either way, either I'll be a stranger and I'll buy it, or I'll take it because it belongs to me because I am a permanent resident here. Right? In other words, I'll take it legally because it belongs to me. Right?
It's more legal if he pays for it.
Don't mix in another idea here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
He's saying both things, right? Others, this land, I need land here, and there's two ways that I have a right, that either I'm gonna pay full, or I get it because it belongs to me. How does it belong to him?
Hashem
Because Hashem promised it to him, right? So either way you want to look at it, I gotta get land here,
It's a
right?
win-win situation.
Huh?
It's a win-win for him. One way or the other, he gets the land.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I know there's both either side, right? Um, so, but Rashi here doesn't seem to address this. There in Parshas Chayei Sarah, where Avram said that, used the two different terms that are contradicting to each other, he addressed it, but here he doesn't address it. Why not? Right?
Two different,
It's the same terminology. It's the same contradiction. There was a contradiction. What do you mean? I'm a stranger or I'm a permanent resident? What do you mean? That's a contradiction. Are you either you're one or the other? So Rashi addressed it there. However you want to perceive me, I'm got to get the land, right? But Rashi doesn't address it here.
Maybe because he addressed it before, he doesn't address it again. The
Yeah, but
concept.
okay, but then what does it mean over here? That doesn't answer here. Remember what here we're saying that the land is not yours eternally, right? And it's given the pasuk is giving a reason that you were strangers and you're not permanent. That makes sense, but that you are permanent, how's that make sense? Then I should get the land permanently, right? Guys, you with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Leslie, you're with me?
Yes.
So Rashi needs to address that. That seems to contradict the point of the verse. The verse is telling us the reason you don't keep land eternally is for a reason. What's the reason? Because you're a ger and toishav. Ger makes sense. Toishav, how's that fit in? Right? And we see we have an instance where it was used, those two words that are contradictory to each other. Avram used it. And Rashi had to explain it. Because he's saying, if you want like this, if you look at me like this, then I'll buy it from you. And if you look at me like this, then it belongs to me. Right? And Rashi had to explain. But how come he's not explaining here? Okay? Don't figure it out. Just be bothered by the question.
Same question, we just gave.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
And as Rashi explained in by Avram Avinu, that if I'm permanent, then halachically, but in law it belongs to me, right? Well, that's complete contradiction, understanding that word in our reference over here. Because by law, we're saying, well, it doesn't belong to you. You're only leasing it. It's not yours for eternity, right? And Rashi's not explaining. Okay, so the Rebbe explains like this. Explanation is as follows. According to the simple meaning, right? Because remember, the Rebbe is asking on Rashi now. Why is Rashi addressing this, right? He addressed it in Chayei Sarah, and here all the more so you need to address it. Because it's complete contradiction. There you could say it's not a contradiction. After all, we know that the land is given to him, right?
Mhm.
So we understand that he's a permanent resident, right?
How about maybe bought the land, but it wasn't,
Hmm?
it wasn't, it was only permanent after he bought it.
What are you talking about now by Avram?
Abraham.
Right?
First he was negotiating with,
No, we don't have a problem over there because Rashi addressed it over there. That's not over in Chayei Sarah is not an issue. The issue is here because Rashi addressed it over there. He explained. Either way you perceive me, the land I need to get.
Yeah.
Either I am a ger, meaning a sojourner. I don't live here. It doesn't belong to me, but I'm gonna buy it, therefore forthright. Or if I am, you do consider me, because remember, this is already, he says this after, they're already honoring him and speaking to him like, because he's an important person. And like, so, okay, hey, either way you want to look at me, right? I need the land. So Rashi addressed it, but here he doesn't address it. That's our issue.
Heritage. Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Rebbe explains. These two expressions, Gerim v'Toishavim, right, that are contradictory to each other, right, are connecting to two different types of ownership that a Jew has of the land. Two different types of ownership. Let's see. The expression Gerim expresses that the Jew, after Hashem has promised that your seed will have the this land, but after the promise, but before we entered into the land and conquered it. Aha. In other words, God promised to us, but we didn't go in yet. From the promise from Avram Avinu until the Jews went into the land of Israel, the promise was made in the year around 2024. 2024.
Okay.
Huh?
Coincidence.
The real 2024.
Yes, right? And when did the Jews actually conquer the land? In the year 2484. 2448 is when they went out of Egypt. 40 years later, they right? 2484. So we're talking about over 400 years later. Was it our land? Yes, it was our land. But what was our relationship to the land itself? We were like a ger, right? Like a stranger, a sojourner, right? Because we weren't in the land. We didn't conquer the land yet. We didn't have it. So our connection to the land is in that manner.
But it was their land based on the promise that Abraham.
Yeah, but Avram already said it. Either way you want to look at me, right? Because there was two ways to look at his connection to the land then, right? He was on the land. Okay, it wasn't conquered yet, but So, but the term ger means our connection we have to the land in a manner that we're not yet settled on the land, but we're still connected to the land.
Yeah.
It's our land, right? And 100 years ago, 500 years ago, was the land of Israel our land? Yes. What was our connection to the land? Well, we weren't living there, but it was still our land. So we were like Gerim, if you will, right? That's what the Rebbe is saying, right? Now, the expression Toishavim, which means you're a resident, right? Is connected to the situation when the Jewish people, after they enter the land, they've conquered it and they got their portion of land. Then we're not Gerim in connection to the land. We are Toishavim, right? We live in the land. And this is what the verse is coming to tell us. That we have a ownership of the land in two ways. It can express itself. One is it's not a complete one, right? In a time that we're not settled on the land, right? Then we're considered like Gerim. And then there is a time that we are settled on the land. That you are, right? As the verse says, that you are with me. And therefore, Therefore, you don't have the permission to sell the land eternally against my will. In other words, God is saying you have two relationships with the land. Look what the verse says. Wow. It says, because you were strangers and residents with me. What's with me? What's with me? What's with me?
You're my people.
In other words, it's only because of me. So it's even when it is a permanent resident on the land that it's yours, it's still with me. It's only because of my will. So it's not in that sense, even then, it's only because of me. Therefore, you don't have it eternally.
It doesn't belong to me anyway, it belongs to God.
It belongs to God. Even when you're settling in the land, it's not yours, it belongs to God. Very profound idea there. You got that? And therefore, even when you are settled on the land, it's because you're with me, because of me, and not because of you, right? Mm-hmm. Very profound, subtle idea over here. Yeah, and I worked really hard to, earn this silver goblet, right? And you feel like it, and it's mine because I worked hard for it. And that's the feeling a person has, and they feel that the things they have is theirs permanently, right?
Temporarily.
No, permanently. That's not how a person feels. You feel that your belongings are yours permanently. Now, I could give it away, I could sell it, but in the having of it right now, I feel it's eternity of mine. Why? If it was easy come, easy go, that is right. Then then okay, then you don't feel it's permanent. But if you worked hard for something, you've sensed its permanence, that it's yours. That's what the verse is coming to tell us, the opposite. No, because you're with me. It's because of me. Don't think it's because of you. Even when you're swelling in the land and it's yours because you conquered the land and it's yours. No, it's because you're with me. Wow, what a powerful. Others, right? You worked hard to get the land. So you're going to feel like the Chalutzim in the beginning of the state of Israel. They felt very proud in themselves and left out God from the national anthem. They left out God from the Declaration of Independence. They left God out completely because it's mine. I worked hard for it, and it's permanently mine. The verse is saying the opposite. No, it's not. It's not permanently yours. It's not going to be sold permanently because it's not yours permanently, because you're with me. And if you're with me, I'm permanent. The land, right? And your relationship to the land is not permanent in the sense it's yours.
Basically,
That it's yours.
Basically, everything belongs to Hashem.
It belongs to Hashem. So in the land, you have to feel the sense of it. You're with God and it belongs to him. And therefore, even when you're settled in that, wow, is that unbelievably powerful? Do you get that?
Yeah.
Leslie?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like mind-boggling. Mind-boggling.
Isn't it the same as a object?
What?
Do I own this?
I'm talking about when I said is your feelings. You're right. When you work hard for something, you feel it's deservedly yours.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How do you feel about it being deservedly yours? Just for the day? No. Just for the week? Forever. I mean, unless you decide not afterwards to give it away, but you feel deservedly yours, right?
Yes.
That's what the verse is coming to say. And land all the more so. It's my land. People fight for land. They die for their land, right? For their piece of land, right? More than the goblet. So the land even more so, you're going to feeling a sense of your permanence. Versus saying, no, it's not permanently yours. You need to, even when you are on the land as a resident, right? When you would feel the permanence in what you are in the land, because no, goes back to you're with me. Because you're with me, you have to know that it's you're with me, and the permanence is in with God.
Still heritage.
Huh?
It's still heritage.
Well, that's why it goes back to the right.
Yeah.
It's a very subtle point over here.
Harry brought it.
Because the land is eternally ours as the Jewish people, but my land, right? We're talking about your specific plot of land, right? Of course, we're not talking about the permanence of the land of Israel being the Holy Land. We're not talking about that as a generality. We're talking about my specific land that I have in the land of Israel, right? That I bought. In my buying it, you're going to feel your sense of permanence in what you bought, right? Humanly, we do. Torah tells us differently, but humanly, we feel, it's mine. When I say it's mine, what am I saying? It's mine for today? Oh, it's mine for good, right? That's what you feel.
That's why we have the same thing, the same idea as Bikurim. The land
Yeah.
is not
Oh, that's
mine.
why you have to bring the first fruits. Exactly. That's why we have to bring the first fruits and all the things that we have to give to Hashem to remind us that are things. But here we're talking about land. Land is even more than things. Things I'd be ready to give up faster than land itself. Because land, by its definition, is what do we call it? Real estate. It's real. Because it's permanent. Real is permanent. Hence, real estate.
Real estate.
Got it? Because it's real. Land doesn't go away. It's got permanence inherently. The goblet does.
Yeah.
Right? And even that you feel, it's mine. I'm saying it's mine. I feel, in the feeling of it, it's mine for good. And for bad. Okay, folks. We'll see you in a few minutes. Bye.